Welcome to the Blue Oasis Podcast. This is the podcast for finding peace and prosperity in your life, learning the history of hobbies, as well as making a little side hustle out of your hobbies. If you want to find balance in your life and find peace, this is your show. Get ready. You're listening to the Blue Oasis Podcast. I am your host, Adam Rothstein. All right, let's get to the show. And welcome back to the Blue Oasis Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Rothstein. With me today is Guy Morris. Guy, how are you?
Doing great, Adam. Thank you for having me.
All right. So you have quite a background. You've been all over the place. You've been
some say diverse, some say eclectic. But yeah, quite a background.
Quite a background indeed. Disney, producing Disney records. You're an author, and you even ran away from home.
That was, I had a rough start. True. My journey began as a 13-year-old homeless runaway. I worked alongside migrant workers in Southern California to survive. Went back home briefly at some time when I was 14 in order to get a GED. I got that when I was 15, and I left home and never looked back. But that was kind of a rough start, but that was not the end. So I got a chance to go to college a few years later, and in my mind, that was my chance to change my stars. And so I really kind of took every advantage of it.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine, even at 13, even if you are hating your parents or it's like that teenage phase, you're going through puberty and all that stuff, that's the last thought on my mind. But
it wasn't something I felt that it was almost a necessity. I came from a pretty violent, abusive background. I won't go into all the details, but it was a pretty horrific experience. And one particular event happened that kind of, it was either that or having it get even worse. I won't go into the details, but yeah, it was sort of not what I really wanted to do, but it was what I felt I needed to do at the time. And in a lot of ways, I look back now and I think it taught me independence. It taught me self-reliance. It taught me the value of hard work. It taught me, taught me that I could never really take anything that I had for granted. I had to work for it and be accountable for myself and for others. And it was, I think overall, it really kind of made me grow up a lot faster than most other kids my age, that's for sure. I think, I look back on it now and realize that while it was a horrible experience at the time, it added value to my life.
okay. Understood. So, and when you went back and got your GED, you didn't go right away to college. You worked you then immediately went back to work. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. Well, I was working the whole time. We were very, very poor. And if I wanted to have a new pair of jeans, I had to work. If I wanted to buy a pair of shoes, I had to work. If I wanted to buy a guitar, I had to work. If I wanted to buy anything I wanted, I had to work for it. And so I continued to work at that point. Now, technically the laws at the time said you couldn't work prior to 16, but I found that if you lied good enough and showed a lot of enthusiasm, that you could get a few places to basically forget to ask for your birth certificate, kind of thing. So I worked at fast food places and other types of places until I graduated. And then when I got my GED, I think it was that May or June, I was in Southern California. I packed up a little tiny knapsack and put my guitar in taped it up into a little box, and then put on a hat that an old guy had given me as a token of his appreciation or affection. And I went walked for a few miles and I found the nearest freeway and hitchhiked my way to Tucson, Arizona. There was a Christian commune there that I had intended to join. And I was there for about 3 months before um, all of my own all of my own issues caught up with me, and I felt uncomfortable around so many people, and was having a hard time feeling connected and trusting. And I got a job there, and I think my first job was parking cars in a garage. It was a business. It was a business building, and they because they had really tight parking for a lot of insurance reasons, they had the attendants basically park the cars for people. So that was my first job.
We're a valet.
I was a valet. So yeah, and my life changed though. I mean, I was struggling. I wasn't making hardly any money. I was still kind of on the edge of poverty. I was renting places that were rat infested and falling apart. But I was part of a church, and I did a lot of ministries with the church at the time. And through that, I met a young woman who was actually 8 years older than I am, as it turns out. We wound up getting married. She got pregnant right away, and I had to think about not only just barely supporting myself, but I had to think about supporting a family. And an opportunity came along, by nothing short of a miracle in my view, for me to go to college. And I saw it as a chance to change my stars. And so while I was functionally illiterate when I started, I took 24 units. I worked my nugget off. I worked at night, usually as a graveyard shift at a 7-Eleven. My wife was ill and we had a toddler, so I had to take care of my toddler. But somehow, I think I slept like 2 hours a night for like 4 years. Somehow survived it, and it graduated with multiple degrees at the top of the dean's list. I was given a full scholarship to go to graduate school. I was also accepted into the Harvard MBA program. And all of that good fortune was a result of the fact that I had developed a macroeconomic model. One of my degrees was in economics. I had developed a macroeconomic model that, very complex computer model with lots of algorithms to forecast the future of the GNP and interest rates and all that kind of stuff for business purposes. My model outperformed the Federal Reserve and virtually every other bank in the nation, and changed how we do computer models to this day.
Amazing. What university did you go to again? Just
University of Arizona.
University of Arizona. Okay, that's not Sun Devils, right? Or is that Arizona State?
That's, I think, Arizona State.
Okay.
I want to say Wildcats, but to be honest, I was so slammed trying to take care of work, life, school. I had no social life. I didn't go to any games. That was the last thing on my mind. While all the other kids were basically out partying, I was working or had my nose in a book.
Unbelievable.
That was my chance to change my stars. They had all come from good families. They had all come, a lot of them drove to school in the cars that daddy bought them. I rode my bicycle to school. And so this was my chance to change my stars, and there was absolutely no way I was going to let anything stand in that way.
Amazing.
Sad, but I never really got that party gene. I was too desperate and too hungry to do that.
I was never much of a partier. I was an introvert. I did go to football games at my university. Never went to any basketball games. Big regret, but to just stick it out and just study for countless hours a night is just incredible. And you were allowed to take 24 units at the time. That's got to be okay.
I was not only allowed to take 24 units, but I was accepted into the program 24 units deficient of the minimum requirements to enter to get accepted. And they said that they would would allow me to make it up as I went. So that was part of the reason why I took a heavy load. The other part was I was working on multiple different degrees, economics, finance, and computer science. And so there was no shortage of reading requirements and homework and studies and other things, programs to develop and other things to do. And then, as I said, my wife was ill at the time. And so I had to spend a lot of time taking care of our daughter. And then when I wasn't doing any of those things or studying, I was at work. And while I was at work at 7-Eleven, because I took the night shift because I figured it would be quiet and would give me a chance to study while I worked.
That's incredible. Wonderful thinking. I mean,
It is a wonderful thing. But it cost me a little bit. I wore myself down so bad that the last 3 months of my final undergraduate semester, I caught something called valley fever, which is sort of a viral form of mononucleosis. And I was in bed for over a month. And so I had to come out of that and try and play catch up. And I think I was fortunate in that my computer model was mostly done at that point, and that the results of that model, which got a lot of notice around the country, enabled me to kind of get some grace period from some of my professors to kind of make up for things. So I graduated technically, but I actually had to work a little bit the following summer to kind of make up for some of the work that I had missed. But I was going to go to grad school, and so I needed some time before grad school started, and so it gave me that chance to basically keep my degrees, graduate, but continue on. So, but yeah, I pretty much wore myself out, and that wouldn't be the first time that I worked myself into into the sick bed. I would tend to. Growing up the way I did, I think even though I had accomplished a lot in college and then since, it took me decades to get over the idea that somehow I was just this dumb poor kid, because I grew up with my parents, my stepdad and my mom telling me that I was dumb and worthless, and my best hope in life was to join a trade union. And so it took me a while to get past the idea that I didn't have the benefits that everybody else had. The only thing that I had was that I could work harder than most other people. And so that was my fallback. Was I didn't have to be. I couldn't do it with my charm. I couldn't do it with schmoozing. I couldn't do it because of daddy's name. I couldn't do it for all the other reasons Fortune 100 executives will typically succeed. I had to work harder than pretty much everybody else. And that became sort of something that followed me for decades.
All right. So you made the dean's list frequently, correct?
Well, no, that was my first couple of years. I was hoping to actually continue. I was hoping to pass far enough to get to the next year. I got to the dean's list the final year, when I had one of my senior economic professors for my more senior classes was the dean of the business college. And he and I got to know each other. I became his biggest pain in the ass, because I would constantly be saying, "No, wait a minute, what about? Well, how do you explain this?" Or, "Well, tell me more about that." And I would ask so many questions during class that he basically, halfway through the semester or through the year, he basically said, "Okay, Morris, you get 3 questions per class. That's your limit." And so if I raised my hand, he'd say, "Now, you're sure you want to waste one of your 3 on this one, or can you wait till later for that?" So he kind of, I became his most kind of annoying student in a lot of ways. But the reason my macroeconomic model had outperformed everybody else was because I had a theory as to why the other models were deficient and missing a big piece of the economy, that they weren't not a big piece of the economy, but a key element of how the economy worked, that they were missing. And that happened to be the productivity change of technology investments. And nobody at that point in the late 70s was thinking along those lines. And I happened to develop that theory. It was never proven. I had to basically write up the theory and then build the algorithms to prove it. And that definitely caught his attention. I think that alone, and the university got tons of grants from the federal government to continue working on that theory. I didn't want to do any more computer modeling at that point. I was burned out. I wanted to go on to something else, but it definitely brought him a lot of attention, brought the university some attention, brought me some attention.
And and I guess that leads me to my next question. So after all that success at the University of Arizona and grad school and everything that came in between, you began producing music for Disney Records
Well, yeah. Well, I started a career. Starting with IBM, I went to a number of different, no matter how smart you are, maybe it would have been different if I'd actually gone to Harvard, but I didn't have the money to do that and relocate the family and didn't know how to get a job there and all that kind of stuff. But, you start off with a lot of different, management and training kind of jobs and finance and economics, and they move you around to the different groups that are mergers and acquisitions and a number of other things. So I began a 36-year Fortune 100 career at that point. And one of my goals was to move back to the California coast. So I ultimately got back to California. Unfortunately, my first marriage fell apart, in part because, well, there were a lot of reasons, but part of it was because I had started drinking. I didn't know how to deal with all the pressure. And so I started drinking and started some other dysfunctional behaviors. And so there was a point in time where I had eventually kind of worked myself up. I was at a senior role at Occidental Petroleum. I was doing mergers and acquisitions, corporate planning, corporate budgeting and finance. I was responsible for all of our EPA compliance capital expenditures and moving those up to either the president or the board of directors for approval. And at one stage in time, after my divorce, I wanted to kind of re-explore. After divorce, you're trying to figure out, well, who am I, right? I knew I'd married so young that I was still trying to build my own identity. And so I started doing the things that I loved. I learned how to go diving. I went diving on wreck dives. I went deep diving. I did a lot of diving off of California. I learned to sail, and I bought an old 1956 wooden sailboat and fixed it up, and then wound up selling that. And at one point in time, my son, who I had custody of, decided he wanted to live with his mom because she was living in a really nice house with a pool and everything else. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to be alone, I didn't want to rent this big townhome that didn't really make sense for me. So I sold everything and bought and moved on a big 50-foot overall sailing yacht. And so a friend of mine was a film producer, and how Disney started was I made some friends in LA, and he was a film producer, an indie producer, and he wanted to do a project. He had the idea for a project of going to Nickelodeon and having them create sort of an MTV kind of channel in Nickelodeon, but for kids' music. And I thought, well, I didn't know how much kids' music there was out there. I wasn't aware of that much, but I thought, okay, well, sure. And he said, he played me. I said, do you have any demo songs for him? Any place to start? And he played me a song, and it sucked. It was like really like heavy grunge music for kids. It was like, I said, I don't think that's gonna fly. He says, I know, I need some more songs. And I had been a songwriter for many years. That was one of the things I trained myself when I was young, and and so he asked me if I'd write some songs for him. So I did. I wrote him, spent 3 or 4 or 5 days and wrote him 5 songs. And we went into the studio and this massive, like 14-hour long studio session. We recorded all of them, and he had his project. And so I went back to doing sailing and doing other things. I didn't think much of it. But he never got the project with Nickelodeon. 6 months later, I get a phone call from out of the blue. Hello, Guy Morris. I said, yeah. And he said, well, this is Harold, and I can't remember his last name, Barnes or something like that. I said, from Disney Records. I'm listening to your music and I really like it. I'm listening to your song, blah blah blah, or listening to your tape and I'm really liking it. And I'm thinking, and I'm honestly thinking, and I challenged him. I said, who is this really? I said, I didn't send Disney any tape. He said, well, yeah, I'm looking at the tape right now. It's in my hands. I said, I'm pretty sure I didn't send anybody any tape. I never send anybody any tapes. And he listed the names of the songs. I said, oh, that's Jack's tape. Jack must have sent you that tape. And it turns out my friend, when he didn't get into Nickelodeon, he passed the demo tape on to Disney. So the way they did it at the times, they had a lot of contract songwriters. So I was still working my corporate job. I was living on the boat. They had a lot of contract songwriters and they would have projects. And let's say it's a mermaid project, right? So they would have the songs that they had in the mermaid movie, which is a different tier. That's the movie division. But then the toy division and the parks division would basically take those themes and they would make some kind of toy, a mermaid doll or something, a mermaid book. And they would then sell it with a little cassette full of songs but they didn't want to pay the really high priced copyrights to the big guy that did all the movie. So they would get other songwriters to write other mermaid themed songs and they would sell that with the toys. So I worked on a mermaid project and an Aladdin project and a scary songs project and a dinosaurs project. And I think there was one other, I can't remember. And I did that for, I guess, a couple of years.
Wow. So okay, so
I quit because it was really hard to work for them. You'd get a call on Tuesday, and they'd want a demo tape by next Tuesday, And the first couple times was fun. Then it started to become sort of a knee-jerk sort of burden, where I'd have to cancel everything to write songs for this particular theme, and then go and find a studio where I could record them.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So I can credit you for creating part of the orchestra or the OST, the orchestrated soundtrack for The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and I think The Land Before Time. Is that Disney or is that
if you had
else?
bought the toys at the parks at that time or in the Disney store, and they had Disney stores out then, they would sell toys with those things, and a lot of times they would have little. At the time, it was cassette tapes. So I'm dating myself. Then later it became CDs. I'm not sure what they're doing now, but yeah, if you had bought a toy for somebody back then, it might have had one or more of my probably. Let's see, I landed songs, and they wouldn't always take the songs you wrote. So they would then decide from all the contractors which ones they liked. But I definitely landed on Dinosaurs, a scary song project, and I wasn't Aladdin. It might have been a mermaid. I can't remember now, but it's been for 35 years.
And I forgot, was The Land Before Time? You said you worked on a dinosaurs project. I'm thinking The Land Before Time, but I'm not. I forgot if that was Disney.
No, there was a dinosaur show on on TV, and it was like essentially these Muppets that were dinosaur Muppets. And there's it was I watched the show. Some of it was funny, some of it was irritating. It was almost like a honeymooner. Some of the characters were almost like honeymooners if they were dinosaurs. But it was the big fat daddy, the big daddy, and then the lounge lizard kind of Tyrannosaurus Rex kind of character, and the baby, and so it had all these themes. And as I said, it's been a while since I've worked on it, but yeah, it was actually the dinosaur show.
I know what you're talking about now, and I guess, all right, I'm not going to spoil the ending for those who haven't watched it. I know what it is.
You can still hear some of my demo songs. I actually produced some of my demo songs and put it on Bandcamp. So if you go to guymorris.bandcamp.com, you can listen to some of those demos on the Kids Project song.
Okay. I do want to move on to the books and your awards, and any advice for future authors.
Oh, advice for future authors. Don't make excuses, just do it. The first draft always sucks. Don't worry about writing something that's going to be award winning when you're first starting writing. And the other thing I would say is take classes, right? Learn the gifts. Now, I had come out of a corporate environment. So when I wrote my first book, I had been writing for years, but I've been writing PowerPoints, executive briefs, policy statements, technical manuals, things like that. Developing characters and plot and themes and getting people to smell and listen to and feel the environment you're in. Those are the things I kind of had to learn. And the first book I wrote, and the other thing, but I had to get some help in doing that. And I hired a developmental editor on my first book, paid a lot of money to have her basically. She was out of Simon and Schuster. She was now an editor at Amazon. She was doing some freelance because she knew my wife, so she was going to help me. And I asked her, I said, listen, I think there's a really great story here, but I need your help to really kind of get it to where it's a really great novel. And I said, I need you to rip me up and show me how to put it back together again. Well, God bless her. She took me at my word. I got 44 pages of single space typewritten notes of things I had to read, things I had to learn, changes, things I needed to stop doing, things I needed to start doing. My grammar was way off. I had to develop style, just buku things. And then every single page of the manuscript had notes of what to change and how to change it. And my first thought when I got all this back was, oh, Lord have mercy, I suck. maybe I shouldn't do this. After I kind of took some deep breaths, kind of got over, spent a week feeling sorry for myself. I said, well, she did exactly what I asked her to do. So and I paid for this. So I might as well start at page 1 and start working on this. And I did. I took some classes. I took master class. I bought some books. I bought the specific books she told me. That book was listed as was The Curse of Cortez. It was listed on Book Trip, which is a subsidiary of Barnes & Noble, one of their favorite 25 books of 2021. They called it Indiana Jones Meets Da Vinci Code. It was a finalist for Book of the Year from the Reader's Favorite 2 years ago. So it was a really good first draft experience, but I wound up rewriting that story probably 30 to 50 times before I got to the version that I actually settled on. So be patient as an author. Be willing to put in the work. Don't just write something and think that everyone's going to go gaga over it. Be willing to have people rip you up and tear you apart and give you a model on how to get stitched back together. Do that hard work and do research. That was the other thing I learned, was that nobody writes well about something they don't research, whether it's a location or the restaurants you're going to have if it's a romance, you got to know which restaurants and what's on their menu. And if it's a thriller, which is what I write, you need to know geographies and science and politics and religion. Do the homework of doing the research, and your readers and your reviewers will see it and they'll appreciate it. So even regardless of what genre you write, research is a key to success.
Of course. I'll tell you about my experience because I think this would be fitting. I wrote a book by the name of Dribbling Freedom, and that was, if you're familiar with the Kelo versus the New London Supreme Court case, I decided to mirror that court case and then but have like NCAA basketball and also have it take place in the city of Pittsburgh because I needed a Rust Belt city for the story to progress. And I talk about the geography. I actually had to learn about the Oakland neighborhood a bit and as well and just the building of the Pitt football stadium as well, and how they did that. And it is humbling too. And you're not going to know everything right away. And I just put it on Amazon because sometimes you have to go, and because if you believe in something, put it out there, because
Yeah.
a lot of the establishment, the authors establishment, if you will, they miss good things. I mean, Harry Potter was rejected until an 11-year-old boy was given like the first draft of it, or one of the drafts of the book, and he loved it too. So you just never know.
Well, that brings up a good point. And this is a personal choice, but the publishing industry is changing and it's evolving. Many people have the idea that, and I did too, that I wanted to get an agent, go to a traditional publisher, get paid this big giant advance, and I would, become a bestseller. And after several, not every single one of my books has won critical praise, recognition, and/or awards, and I'm selling reasonably well in certain channels. But I got rejected by over 100 different agents. Now, whether it's the way you write your query letter, a lot of times I realized it was because I didn't have a big platform at the time, because I had ignored Twitter and all the other social media because I was busy writing books. But there's all kinds of reasons why agents don't want to deal with you unless you have some market or something that they can actually attach onto. If you're already an influencer and you've got 1 million followers, they want to follow that too. But if you don't have that profile, it doesn't matter how good you write or how compelling your story is. It's really hard to get an agent. Without an agent, it's hard to get a good publisher. So I explored the various different other forms of publishing, from vanity press, which is basically, the doesn't matter the quality of your book, they'll go ahead and, write the covers and format it and do some minor technical editing for you and get it out there. Or hybrid press, which is a little bit of both indie plus traditional publishing, or full indie publishing. And I realized that what a publisher does, I could do myself. Not that I would do my own editing, but a publisher is going to hire a professional editor. So I went and I sought out some professional editors with a lot of creds and a lot of experience and a lot of positive ratings. I spent the money. If I believed in my book enough that I thought they should invest in it, I figured I should invest in it as well. And so I did. I invested in my own books. I invested in top quality editors and designers and formatters. I put together an amazing website. I started building my social media presence and my platform. That's taking a while, but I'm getting up there now. And so I wanted to produce a product that I felt I would be proud of, that would sit right next to a Dan Brown or a James Rawlings or a Michael Crichton. Now, Kirkus, which is a gold standard in the industry, has recommended all my books, and they only recommend about 30% of the books in the publishing industry. So to get that 30% as part of that 30% as an indie is good. But again, if you really want to be a writer, I don't believe in doing anything unless I'm going to really put my heart and soul into it and really try to work hard to be as good as I possibly can be. Research is part of that, choosing your publishing vehicle. So I decided to go indie, not because I don't think I'm good enough to get published in the traditional market, but because I just didn't fit their niche profile, right? And so I decided I would build up that platform by having 3 or 4 different amazing books, and maybe the next book, a traditional publisher. I'm going to be going to Miami in a couple of weeks for the Reader's Favorite Awards ceremony, where I'll be meeting with some publishers and some agents. And since this is the 3rd award I've won from Reader's Favorite, maybe I'll get some attention there, maybe not. Maybe the next book, maybe not. It's not what I'm trying to say is, don't let those kinds of hurdles be what stops you. There are all kinds of ways for you to find a market and a reader for your readership for your book. Don't let the idea that I have to go traditional publishing or not anything at all be your roadblock.
Okay. I guess final question. Awards. What was your first award? How many awards you've had, and just recommendations for getting to that point for anyone else.
Well, the first award I got, the Curse of Cortez was the first book that I wrote, but I wanted to continue polishing that when it wasn't the first book I published. My second book that I wrote was a book called Swarm that dealt with artificial intelligence, political and religious corruption. It dealt with issues with having to do with the 2020 election, China, a number of things that were going on at the time that made it all my beta readers were saying, you got to get this book out there. Don't wait for a publisher. Even my wife, who had basically been saying, no, I don't want to spend the money for you to publish, was say, okay, you got to get this out there. Just pay to do it. And the inspiration for that book, just a short story I think your listeners might like, was that I'm an AI expert. So I knew a lot about the industry and the business, and I'd been growing concerned with artificial intelligence for a number of years. But I was inspired to write the books when I discovered that a program had escaped the NSA spy labs at Sandia. When I figured out how a spy program could escape the NSA, and what they may have designed it to do that needed that specific technology, they sent 2 FBI agents to my door. Apparently, they were a little upset that I had figured out something they thought was supposed to be top secret. And more than that, what bothered them even more was my snarky attitude. Yes, I did it. I figured it out. You wouldn't be here if I'd gotten it wrong. Oh man, this is so cool. I can't wait to tell all my friends. I got the "We are not amused" speech from them. And then my wife came home and I got the "What did you do" speech. So after that experience, I thought, okay, I've got to write it. I've got to start writing about my knowledge of AI and how this stuff works and why we, into a series of thrillers. And of course, with a thriller, it's not only about being well informed, but about asking the simple question of, gee, what could go wrong? So my first award was with Swarm. That was my AI thriller. That won the Reader's Favorite Gold Award. It was also a finalist for the IAN Book of the Year. And I didn't really pay much attention to it at the time because I didn't understand about some of the awards, and I was really busy trying to get the next book out. So then I got out the Curse of Cortez, and the Curse of Cortez was a finalist for an award from Reader's Favorite, but then it was listed on BookTrib, which, as I said earlier, Barnes & Noble's favorite 25 books of 2021. And that actually got me a lot of attention because of how big BookTrib is. And it's for when I do a lot of signing events. I do probably about 30 a year, and that's my number one seller, is the Curse of Cortez. The third book that got released is a sequel to a follow-up of the series, the AI series I started with Swarm, and it's called The Last Ark. And that one just won the Reader's Favorite Silver Award last month, and that's where I'm going down for the award ceremony.
Amazing. And I think,
and I don't apply for a lot of contests. I know that I have applied for other contests where I didn't really rate, so it's not a universal thing. Some of them are looking at literary style. Some of them are looking at more literary type of work. I'm a typical thriller, so I'm really looking for that emotional reaction from my reader and the ability to get them to think and thought-provoking. But I've been very honored and humbled by the fact that every single book has gotten some level of recognition.
Okay. And even though I'm probably really far away from ever getting to that publishing standpoint of any awards, I mean,
you never know that. You just got to keep working at it. Yeah.
Just got to keep working at it. I've published mostly nonfiction stuff, so I'm not sure how that would do. But
yeah, that's a little harder. Yeah,
a little harder to do.
But nonfictions tend to make more money than fiction. So there's more ready markets. There's a lot of people that want to learn how to do whatever or want to learn about some topic, and so I've actually been tempted to write a nonfiction about artificial intelligence just to fund the other books.
I think that's a wonderful idea. If anyone wants to apply to any of these awards, there is an application process to this.
All of them have an application process and some sort of fee. Right, there are very few that are free because they have to get judges, they have to get people to read these books. Some of them get thousands of submissions. Some of them are part of the process of getting a professional review on the book. So they're looking at the reviewers to be part of that initial filtering process. And so yeah, it's I at one point in time I looked up all the different book awards for thrillers, and there were a dozen. But I had to decide for myself, do I want to spend my promotional money trying to just apply for book awards? Is that really going to get me readers? Or do I spend the money on a video trailer? Or do I spend the money on some other promotion? Or do I spend the money producing my next book? So for every author, one of the things about being an author that I would tell your listeners is that it's a business. And so with any business, you have to have capital, you have to have resources, you have to have goals and objectives, and there's going to be trade-offs and constraints. You only have so much money to work with, and so you may want to you need to do some form of promotion, but you have to decide what the best use of your dollars are. And for me, I found that most of the things I tried to do online for promotional purposes didn't provide me with a return on my investment. Now, in other words, what that means, if I'm going to spend $100, just to make a round number, on a promotion, I'm expecting to get at least $101 in royalties back. And if I didn't, it's not returning and it's not giving me a return on the investment. Now, there's some of it that if you're a brand new author and nobody knows who you are, and it's a fiction. I mean, with a nonfiction, there's a study, you can find markets for people who are in that business or who are interested in that topic. But you got to build up your name, and that there's a little bit of promotional cost in terms of just getting people to know who you are. I found for me, my best promotional dollars was to do events. So I formed a group here in the Seattle area. We now also have a chapter now in Seattle and one in Portland. And I basically bring in other really accomplished authors, award winners, bestsellers, really professional people who've written multiple books. And we find dozens of different local events, fairs, and festivals. And we share the cost of a booth, and we sell signed copies of our books. And I sell more books doing that than I do on Amazon, Drafted Digital, Barnes & Noble Online, or any of the other channels.
Okay. I guess anything else you want to add before I close this out?
Yeah, these are I think I'm proud of what I've created. I think I've done a great job. I know I'm getting a lot of recognition. I'd love to, your readers to go. I'm going to be doing a holiday special. They buy a book directly from my website. They get a 15% discount from retail. And that's GuyMorrisBooks.com, and always open for more reviews and email me directly. Let me know what you think.
Okay, and the email will be in the description.
Yeah, there's a way to contact me on the site. There's a contact, kind of a contact page. But yeah, I'm always looking open to hearing people's feedback, pros and cons. I deal with politics and religion, so I know, and artificial intelligence. So I pick all kinds of things where I can basically step on somebody's toes. But I think that controversy allows us to really kind of create thoughtful scenarios and characters and plots and get people to really engage in dialogue and thought and thinking. And so I really try to kind of go after the meat of the bones, the meat of the matter, and hopefully stir some thought. There's artificial intelligence is going to be the most profound technology that the world has ever seen. There's going to be good and bad things that will come out of it. And part of my job, what I'm trying to do with some of my books is to do with artificial intelligence to raise the awareness of what could go wrong scenarios are, the same way that Michael Crichton did with DNA and cloning with Jurassic Park. So I'm hoping to have an impact, and so far the people who read the book have telling me that I'm on track so far.
Okay. All right. I will put the links to your books, your website, and your email in the show notes. You can just send that to me on Podmatch. And with that being said, that'll conclude this episode. But before you go, if you'd like to support me, I will have my links in there for the Substack for this. I'll also if you want to support me, you can get an audiobook or Dribbling Freedom, all that great stuff. All the links for both of us will be in the description or show notes, depending on if you're on YouTube or podcast form. So check that out and share it with your friends. Like, comment, subscribe, 5-star rating, write a little review, all that jazz. And with that being said, take care.